Hello, everybody. My name is Arsani, and I have the pleasure of introducing our speaker today, Dr. Chin Hong. Dr. Peter Chin Hong is an Associate Dean for Regional Campuses and a Professor of Medicine in the Division of Infectious Diseases at the University of California, San Francisco. He currently practices clinical care for COVID-19 patients, and he completed both his undergraduate and medical school degrees at Brown University. He is trained in internal medicine and has completed an infectious disease fellowship at UCSF. As part of his regional campus role, he is involved in the leadership team of 3 UCSF School of Medicine regional campuses: UC Berkeley, UCSF Fresno, and UC Merced. He has served on the admissions committee for the medical school for several years at UCSF. And during COVID-19, he has been one of the leaders of institutional and community education around the disease. He has been a part of numerous university initiatives, including outreach to the Asian American community and the Association of Black Cardiologists national webinars on the impact of COVID-19 on minority populations. Most recently, he was awarded the Carl Sagan Science Popularization Prize in 2022. Thank you for being here, Dr. Chin Hong.
Thanks so much, Arsani. I'm just going to share screen and hopefully this will work. Can you see this?
Yes, we can.
Yes, we can. Yeah.
Great. So I thought I would divide the talk, my comments, and then we'll have Q&A. I'll divide my talk into 2 sections. The first section is really telling you a little bit about my own journey and kind of ending in terms of what I'm currently doing at UCSF School of Medicine. And then the second part of the talk will just really be giving you hints on what makes a successful applicant to medical school right now. So let me just start. So as was mentioned, my name is Peter Chin Hong. I'm actually from the Caribbean, from Trinidad. And I just remember growing up in the Caribbean. Trinidad is the southernmost Caribbean island, and just feeling free. This was a view from, many of the drives that I took as a child. Not many cars on the road, and just having the sea on one side. And I often reflect on that upbringing every time that when I think about how far I've come, basically. Because in those days, I didn't know that I would go to medical school. I would even leave the Caribbean. I would even go to the United States to do college and medical school. So this is Trinidad. It's the southernmost Caribbean island. You see, this is Florida here and Miami, Cuba, Dominican Republic, Jamaica, and Puerto Rico. And then you go all the way down. It's Trinidad right next to Venezuela. Trinidad was a Spanish colony until 1797, then became British, and it became independent in 1962 and became its own republic in 1976. So just to give you a flavor of how I grew up, I'll just play some music. The country is very diverse. It's Afro-Caribbeans, Indians from India, and others, including Chinese, other Asians, whites, really based on the settlement of the island and its early origins and being part of the sugar industry, and later on became, an oil industry focus because of, its proximity to Venezuela. So this is kind of the sounds that I had growing up. The name of the singer is David Rudder. And he's one of the singers that I listened to a lot growing up. The music is calypso and
Can you hear a distant drum?
so just that is just to give you a flavor of the vibe of the place. So my parents were shopkeepers. We lived in a remote part of the island in the south, and we had a general store and we sold kind of everything. They came from my dad was born in Trinidad of one parent was Chinese, the other parent was mixed, and he was sent to China when he was 3 to try to carry on the culture by meeting somebody else, and that's where he met my mom. And then eventually they were reunited back in Trinidad after he came first, and it was there that I was born. So I grew up in the shop, kind of helping out, and my parents are like the social workers of the village. When people didn't have enough money to buy groceries, they'll give it to them or lend it to them. We delivered groceries for free. My dad would write letters for folks who couldn't write. Had a lot of social activities right in front of this store. And then, I was in high school in Trinidad, and one of my high school friends had just moved to Trinidad from the US. His parents had worked briefly in the US. So his brother was applying to colleges and knew a lot about the US system of education. So I looked at the brochure for Brown University, really loved it. It was all in black and white. And so I just applied to Brown, and before I knew it, I was in Providence, experiencing my first winter making snow angels, and did the combined undergraduate and medical school degree. As part of my Brown experience, which is great, and I would never forget many of those experiences. Some of the key features were developing mentors that I'll come back to, people who cared about me, where I would have sort of alone time with somebody to talk about life or hopes and dreams. One of my key mentors worked in the Pacific Islands, and I was always interested in islands because I came from one myself. But the Pacific Islands were very different because they were not settled by immigrants, but they were settled by people who were mainly from there for generations. So I worked in Samoa for maybe 5 summers during undergrad and part of medical school, and really helped shape my motivation and sort of my reason. So this is where I worked on a project during undergrad and medical school in Samoa. So I flew from Providence to Hawaii and then to Samoa, and would work there for the summers on this NIH project. The project was looking at risk factors for obesity, and looking for genetic risk factors in this genetically homogeneous population. Being there really made me reflect on who I was and what culture being from the Caribbean was. And Derek Walcott, who won a Nobel Prize for Literature from Trinidad, talked about people really reflecting on their culture in the Caribbean. It's all a country of immigrants, or a set of countries of immigrants, where you come from different places and you try to reconstruct your original identity, like a vase that is broken, and you try to reconstruct the vase by using glue. And when you make the vase whole again, it looks really ill-fitting and not exactly the same as it was when it was new and symmetrical. But you really want to have that identity so much that you appreciate all of its beauty. And that's how culture was in the Caribbean. And that's why my dad was sent to China to really try to reconstruct that identity and pass it on through the generations before there was internet or anything. So after Brown, and during medical school, I visited my friend, the same friend whose brother was applying to colleges back, and he had moved to San Francisco. and lived in Mission, and I ate a burrito every day and thought I definitely have to move to San Francisco. So I was lucky that I was able to get a residency spot at UCSF in internal medicine. So after medical school for 4 years, you do residency where you specialize and you can subspecialize. So I did internal medicine for 3 years and then infectious disease for 2 additional years. So this is just a picture from Ward 86, which is one of the first clinics in the world to take care of HIV infected patients. And it was one of the things that drew me to UCSF because it was different people with different skills coming around a table to solve a problem that is more than the individuals around the table. And that is another skill that people look for in modern medicine, the ability to work in a team, because it's no longer thinking of individuals working together. You work as a team to help patients and to move medicine forward. So soon at UCSF, I really got drawn into pipeline programs, into people like you. And, you know, during the summers in particular, we would have lots of students visit. I don't do that too much anymore because I'll tell you what I'm doing now. But this was, again, me trying to uh, uplift and give other individuals opportunities like I had opportunities when I was growing up. And one of the opportunities was a program we had with San Francisco State where we, partnered with San Francisco State and UCSF to try and work with students from undergrad and have them mentor doing research projects and then mentor them into graduate and professional schools. So that brings me to where I am now, which is as the Associate Dean for Regional Campuses, UCSF. I'm based in San Francisco and I still teach in San Francisco, but a lot of my work is done in the UCSF School of Medicine's regional campuses. So we have three at Berkeley School of Public Health, at UCSF Fresno, and then most recently UC Merced. And the whole reason for having these regional campuses is to build a workforce, particularly in the Valley, because there aren't enough people there, and we're trying to do that as an institution. And then the pandemic hit. So at this point, I had trained in medicine, I trained in infectious disease. I love teaching, and everything came together during the pandemic where, I had to communicate about COVID because the CDC was silenced and politically. So we took to social media. We couldn't really expose our faces to patients, so that was really tough. So I went around just showing patients what my picture looked like, so they can visualize that and have some sort of social connection. So let's see here. I think what I'll talk about now is just really, one of the things that gives me joy and unites all the things that I do in medical school as a faculty member is activism. And it draws from my roots, from what my parents demonstrated to me growing up. And I think when you apply to medical school, talking about your own unique circumstances and how you get inspired by your family, not only gives the people reading your application a better sense of you, makes you unique, but also actually shapes your future career. So a lot of things that people look for in the medical school application, it's not just really for you to jump through hoops and looking for the best. It's really trying to find the best fit for somebody who would probably be the best advocate for patients and to move American medicine forward. So one of those things to me was activism. And I think during COVID, again, like I mentioned, I knew the infectious disease. I did a lot of teaching already. And we were using social media to talk about COVID and then eventually newspapers, TV, etc. Enlisted my help in trying to communicate these concepts to the community. And that was really fulfilling to me. My current job at UCSF is really teaching, seeing patients, and most of the work now is in building the workforce in the Central Valley, primarily through creating an infrastructure for a new regional campus at UC Merced. And we have now a combined program there as well as a traditional program where people apply from undergrad into medical school. And of course, the program at Berkeley has been around for decades. I also oversee that. But coming back to activism, some of the principles that I learned during the pandemic is using science at the core, speaking up, doing it, working with others, disseminating how you felt using social media or through TV and radio, podcasts, etc. Translating it into policy if you can, like some of the work we did with trying to make incarcerated persons have a safer experience during COVID, and influencing the legislature to depopulate prisons, and then having fun at the end of the day is really key throughout all of this. Let me just think I'm just going to look for one thing here. Hold on. Yeah, so one of the other, I can talk a lot about what we did during COVID, but most recently, we had Mpox, formerly known monkeypox, and all of the lessons we learned during COVID in terms of communicating about it, trying to get people vaccinated, trying to transform the health system to respond to a new outbreak, all came to the forefront with Mpox. So I just wanted to show you a clip of me talking to Reggie Aki, who's an anchor at ABC, about what the role of clinicians is during pandemics.
Thanks so much, Reggie. I had actually another follow-up question, which is, how do you use media for activism, and how can clinicians and physicians get involved in that?
Well, I think it's especially important that we have people on our air and online who are part of the communities that are affected. So, for COVID, we were all affected. There wasn't anyone that COVID didn't touch. And so that was a little bit easier. But for something like Mpox, specifically in San Francisco, where we have such a large queer population, and where at the beginning, we weren't getting a lot of information about Mpox. And that's where the trouble really starts, because that's when there's misinformation, and that's when there are rumors being spread, and that's when panic can happen. So I really saw that as an opportunity to try and prevent the panic and try and get people the help they need as fast as possible. And to be quite honest, to play a role that sometimes our physicians are allowed to play, where we could push major entities involved, including health departments, including our hospitals, and including our politicians, to do something in the absence of action. And what we were seeing from our point of view was not a lot of alarms going off when we thought that there was an urgency. So we play a part in that, but we also have to reach out to physicians in our community who know the players and are also a part of that community, which again, Dr. Peter Chin Hong stepping up after exhausting him with COVID and then immediately going into Mpox, having him and others like him, but especially him, involved in a conversation that he is on the front lines of and also a part of that community, invaluable.
And congrats on your GLAAD award, Reggie. So your efforts can be underestimated. We are also proud. So thank you.
Thank you. And, we did a segment on our air with Dr. Peter Chin Hong and a man named Will in New York who had Mpox as we were speaking with him. And the bravery that Will Hutchinson showed us in that piece was really remarkable. So to have someone who knew what it was like in the moment to treat people with Mpox and knew someone else who knew what it was like to have it, and to just let them have a conversation and have me moderate it occasionally was so powerful. And the fact that GLAD recognized it was truly an honor, an unexpected one, but one that I don't take lightly. And all credit goes to Dr. Peter Chin Hong and Will for participating.
Thanks so much, Reggie.
Of course, thank you.
Thanks.
So I gave you that long story really to give you, my journey and to highlight elements, I think, that, in a more mature career, you can see some of those fires burning within you right now that will come back to inform how you treat patients, how you develop your own career, how you stay motivated, how you stay energized, how you don't burn out. And all of these experiences that I had as a child, even though I didn't know what was coming, even though I didn't know what door will be opened, really came back uh, to help me and inform me in this later stage of my career. So in the second part of the talk, what I'm going to do is really give you some of the brass tacks of getting into medical school from my perspective and achieving your dreams. So I did many things at UCSF School of Medicine since I have been there, including being on the admissions committee. And even though I can't be on the admissions committee anymore, and therefore I can give you this talk, I'm still involved very much in many of the admissions program to the regional campuses that I help oversee, as well as to the main School of Medicine. But one of the things that is really key at any stage of your career is finding a mentor. And you don't have to think about just finding one mentor. You can have more than one. And they don't have to be anybody spectacular. They just have to be somebody who cares about you and who is inspiring to you. So finding a mentor is a key step in your journey, someone you make a connection with, you share similar interests with them. They introduce you to other people, they sponsor you. And I don't mean just not financially necessarily, but talk about you to other people, and that's what networking is. Once you establish these mentor connections and you continue to don't be afraid to call them, email them, reach out, and be available, when you're trying to set up a meeting with them. Be flexible in some way. The second thing is knowing the requirements of medical school. There's a AAMC website, and many of you might have explored that already, but typically you kind of have to know the requirements. They vary, a little bit from school to school, but any major goes. You don't have to be a science major as long as you fulfill the requirements. And most schools agree on the basic elements for pre-medical education, which is 1 year each of biology, general inorganic chemistry, organic chemistry, physics, and related lab work for each. In addition, about 2/3 of medical schools require English, and about 1/4 require calculus. Of course, there's MCATs and letters of recommendation that we'll talk about soon. So in terms of priorities, unfortunately, because there's such limited spots, grades and MCATs are probably the things that people look at for screening, but you don't have to absolutely have the best grades and the best MCATs. I think if you have one or the other, it could be helpful, but I would say that there's something that is particularly important in the first step of screening. I'll talk a little bit about that. Other things, of course, are activities, personal statement, letters of recommendation, and interviews. And I'll go through each of these. So in terms of grades, the absolute GPA is probably not as important as the trajectory. So if you did really poorly in year one, in high school, but in college, sorry, but did continue to do better over time. That means a lot to people. Particularly your MCAT is okay. But grades in biology, chemistry, physics, and math, GPA are probably the most important, and many schools calculate that separately. And again, like I mentioned, the major is less important. So why does the MCAT still matter, and what is the goal? I used to always think that MCATs were kind of dumb, and when you look at the MCAT, it has nothing to do with taking care of patients. But the reason why medical schools look at MCATs is because it predicts whether or not you'd be successfully going on to the following years in medical school. And it works best for both parties, both the medical school and for you, so that you don't waste time either if it's not a perfect fit. And you can see that, say, a 494, about 93% of the class will progress to year 2. But the higher the score, the higher the chances of progressing and this is a predictive long-term model. And that's the reason why schools still use MCATs. During the pandemic, there was a pause in some schools for MCATs, but it's coming back, like SATs are for college. So I talked to Sam Bronfield about his views on grades and MCATs. Dr. Sam Bronfield is a colleague of mine, and currently serves on the UCSF School of Medicine Admissions Committee, and asked him his perspective on grades and MCATs. Thanks for joining us today, Sam. I had a couple of questions about admissions. First of all, what is the importance of grades and MCATs?
Thanks for having me. Yeah, grades and MCATs are definitely important, but they're not the whole application. When I think about someone applying to medical school, I think about the whole package, and the grades and MCATs are just one part of it. I will say that it's definitely better to have higher grades and a better MCAT score, but there's no kind of strict cutoff. There's no level that someone has to meet to get into medical school. It's more just, have they shown that they can do the coursework that's expected in medical school? So have they done well enough in the courses that sort of translate, like some of those science courses, pre-medical courses, in terms of the grades they've gotten? And has that translated to an overall fairly high GPA and then a fairly high MCAT score? When I think about someone whose GPA or MCAT score are a little lower, the things I think about then are, have the grades improved between, say, the start of college and the end of college, showing progress? And the MCAT, really what matters the most is the most recent MCAT score. So if the initial one or attempts are lower, definitely thinking about retaking so that that final one is on the higher side. So that's broadly how I think about grades and MCAT scores.
That's great. And just in general, do you have any last minute advice or special advice regarding grades and MCATs?
I think just to focus on the schoolwork and the academics for sure, and acknowledging that that is a big part of what gets people into medical school. But not all is lost if, say, one course didn't go well or one MCAT score didn't go well. Certainly focusing as much as you can on the science courses and the part of the GPA that comes from those science courses is important. So focusing when you're in those classes on doing as well as you can. But again, if things don't go well, especially earlier in college, GPA wise, there's always time to make it up and do well later. So just taking into account all of that.
And it sounds like you just really look at grades and MCATs as really a marker, but it's not the be all and end all. And you really just look at it as a guide to the rest of the application.
Exactly. If somebody's grades or MCATs are really low, that's problematic. But if they're on the lower side compared to other students, it is still really important for schools to look at the rest of the application and see, like, were there reasons why, the grades slipped during a certain time period or something like that. And then see what else makes the person really special, which is often not the grades and the MCATs. Maybe it's some amazing activity you've done or accomplishment you've made or volunteer work you've done or things like that. So yeah, they really get taken into the context of the whole application.
Great. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Sure.
So this gets to the non-grades part, which is, I think, the fun part. But again, like Dr. Bronfield said, the grades and the MCATs do open the door, but you don't have to have the best grades and the best MCATs ever. So in terms of activities, staying true to yourself, consistency and making a story is key. And patient experiences are important. The reason why patient experiences are important is because they want you to know what you're getting into. So trying to seek these experiences out are important in the application process. Volunteering, having some experience to know that what are you going to be facing in your later career. In terms of activities, having a million different activities is probably not as great as having a cluster of activities. Say you really like inspired by your grandparents, you love working with older members of the community. So many of your activities had to do with working with geriatric population in the community center, or maybe you volunteered in certain areas around that. So that's what I mean by having consistency and a sort of theme, if possible. In terms of a personal statement, it is your story. It's what makes you unique. Think about who you are and how you want to present yourself to the committee, and just start writing. A lot of, including myself, having writer's block is really common. But again, just put something down and then go over it and edit the document over and over again. It's much easier to edit something that you've written than to stare at the blank page constantly. The story typically could be inspired by something that happened to you, and then it comes back to that at the end and gives you a motivation as to why you wanted to do medicine. The personal statement can also highlight one or two things. In the activity section, you might list all the activities. Say you had 10 activities, but in personal statement, you'd probably amplify one or two or three of them that really give a theme or gives a story. In terms of letters of recommendation, having a diverse letter writing group is really important. Maybe one might be a professor, another might be a community leader who you've worked with for a while. That's going to be key. Having people who know you the best is going to be much more important than somebody who doesn't know you that well, but you might perceive them to be more accomplished. So I talked to Dr. Lalasa Varanasi. She works with me in the San Joaquin Valley program. So in the beginning of her remarks, she's going to talk about the SJV program, but then she'll launch into comments about the personal statement letters in general. So I think it's still going to be useful.
Hello everyone, my name is Dr. Lalasa Varanasi and I'm the Director of Admissions for the San Joaquin Valley Prime Plus program. Today I wanted to give you some general guidance and some pointers as you consider starting your medical school applications. I know this is an exciting time, but sometimes thinking about the application can be overwhelming. So I wanted to give you a few tips that might help you in this process. As part of the San Joaquin Valley Prime program, we're really looking for students who are, of course, extraordinary in their academic successes, but also really show commitment to serving the San Joaquin Valley as physicians in the future once they complete their training. First off, in terms of timeline, I would recommend that you get started working on your application as soon as possible. We really want you to take your time and put your hard work and thought into this so that you can make your application as well-rounded and robust as possible. We generally do not grant extensions to the deadline, so I'd recommend getting started on it as soon as you can so that you can submit it before the deadline. When it comes to letters of recommendations, the letter should really provide a well-rounded, well-considered evaluation of your contributions and your potential in the medical field. Generally, as part of your secondary application, you'll submit between 3 to 5 letters of recommendation. And these letters should come from people who know you really well, in an academic or professional sense. So in general, I would recommend asking people who really can comment on your accomplishments and strengths. For example, instructors from upper division courses or other professionals who you've worked with who can really speak to your strengths. And in general, we advise against asking for letters from family members or friends. And then when it comes to your personal statement, this is really a chance for you to express yourself freely and tell us things that we may not necessarily know from reading other parts of your AMCAS application. So you can comment on your life experiences in the past, your background, any experiences that have led to your desire to pursue medicine, and anything else that you really want the admissions committee to know about you and about your character and strengths. So, of course, it is nice to be as concise as possible, but we do want you to kind of elaborate on what you will bring to the program and express how committed you are to serving the San Joaquin Valley and the diverse and underserved population of the Valley. So I hope these pointers help, and I wish you the best of luck as you embark on this journey.
So even though Lalata was speaking about the San Joaquin Valley in particular, you can just substitute any community for that. And I think really what resonates with people reading applications really loudly is people who are really committed to and inspired by the community and by their family. At the end of the day, we are here for community. We are here for patients. So they want to really make sure that you know what you're getting into and that you're really committed, because it is a long road. After you get invited for an interview, I think it's okay to be nervous. You want to dress for the occasion. Many interviews are by Zoom now, some are in person. It's important to really dress professionally for the occasion, know where you're interviewing and know your application. So people will talk to you about what you've written. So it's really important. It sounds like a no-brainer to know what you actually wrote, particularly if you're giving a different cover letter for a different school, to know what you've talked about in that particular letter or secondary question. So some common pitfalls are, people not thinking about the metrics, and I hate to really, again, talk about, grades and MCATs, but those are, again, you don't have to be the best, but they are something that schools look at carefully. You want to have a cohesive set of activities, or emphasize the ones that make a story. You want to have a theme. People look for inconsistencies in the application. For example, if in one section you said you volunteered for over 2 years, but then in another section you said you only volunteered for 6 months, that really raises red flags. So you want to make sure everything is consistent. If somebody writes a letter for you from a community center, and you said in your application you worked there for many years, and they said you only worked there for 1 month, that will raise a red flag. So again, making sure things are consistent is really going to be key. And again, we talked about letters of recommendation already, but the pitfalls are, again, not getting people who know you. Getting people who are family and friends are probably not a good idea, but other people who know you well. But at the end of the day, don't give up. I've mentored numerous students over the years, and I often tell them, you may not be successful in the first round, but try again. Try to have other experiences. Medical school admission rates are low, but people do actually become successful over time. Increase your chances as best as you can. And there are alternative pathways to medicine as well, like other health professions, doing public health, etc. So to close, at the end of the day, you'll be matching into a residency program. So these are just some of the UCSF students matching into different programs on match day. This is San Joaquin Valley students, part of UCSF School of Medicine, at a winery. So it's not all, there's a lot of social time built in. And then these are the Berkeley students who I accompanied on a trip to DC, because part of their mission is really to be change makers and to be activists and to inform policy during their career. So I'll just play this few seconds of the experience where they met the Secretary of Health, the Assistant Secretary of Health, and worked with politicians to talk about causes that were important to them.
This is how we do it. This is how.
So that's a long road ahead, but I think to me, I couldn't imagine doing another career that really encapsulates my heritage, encapsulates my history, my experiences with my parents, and translates that into what I'm doing right now in my career.
It's actually funny because Dr. Levine is actually speaking this fall to our group.
Oh, that's great.
Admiral Levine.
Yes, Admiral Levine. Very inspirational. So I can answer any questions, but I gave a little bit of me, but also some specific tactics around medical school. And again, trying to be as realistic as possible, but not trying to discourage anyone. Because again, over time, in my experience, I really haven't seen many people not succeed.
Thank you for your presentation. I guess for the first question, what would be the difference between the UCSF Prime program and the JMP program?
Yeah, so so UCSF is a big program, the School of Medicine. So it's like 165 or 75 students a year, but they comprise different parallel tracks based on your interests. So the Prime program was set up within the UCs in medical schools to train students who are interested in or who come from underserved communities. So UCSF School of Medicine actually has 3 Prime programs. We have Prime US, which is an urban underserved program based in San Francisco. There's Prime SJV Prime, which is the San Joaquin Valley. And then there is the JMP Prime, the Joint Medical Program at Berkeley. There's also Berkeley students who are not part of Prime, but essentially they're all incorporated and doing the same activities. So I consider them very Prime-like. The difference between Prime and the traditional or categorical track is that the Prime students get more experiences, they get more mentorship around underserved communities. They get more experiences in public health. They get just more community around that, but that doesn't mean you can't get that either in the bigger program. It's just that if you know what you want, you can get that community ready-made for you and can hit the ground running faster. In other UC schools, there are other Prime programs with different emphases, like UC Davis, UC Irvine, UCLA, UC San Diego. They all have different versions of the Prime program.
Alrighty, for our next question. How do you recommend standing out as a Prime US student? If I'm not accepted to Prime US, will I be considered for the regular MD cohort later in the cycle?
Well, yeah, definitely. again, there's nothing magic. You can do the same things as a prime student does, being in the regular track. And even if you go to a school that doesn't have a prime program, you can construct your experiences in exactly the same way. You build your community, you find mentors who are doing the things you want to do. And remember, students were doing this long before these prime programs even came. So there's nothing magical about prime. It just makes it easier. But, if you're creative and, you approach people, you can have very, very similar experiences. So, when I went through medical school, there wasn't any prime program like things, but certainly it is very appealing. So if I wanted if I were going to med school now, it'd probably be something that I'd want to do. But again, if I didn't get into it, I wouldn't be heartbroken because I would be able to have very, very similar experiences.
Are there any jobs offered by the UCSF Medical School that people in undergraduate pursuing their bachelor's degree can work at before applying to medical school?
Yeah, so there's several things you can do before applying to medical schools. I think doing shadowing experiences, I mentioned how important it was, but it could be very difficult to try to get some of these experiences. But what other experiences are structured programs like summer programs that you can apply to. There are several at UCSF pipeline programs. You can just email a bunch of people and see if anybody will respond to you. People are really busy, but if you email a lot, some might actually respond if you have a very short email and you write it well. I know many people would want to do that per se. So that's the way I divide the experiences before applying into a structured program where it's ready-made and you get experiences and panels, career panels, and get introduced to research and all that stuff. Actually, there are three things. Number two is trying to get a job. They are always advertised, research assistants. They come up at various times of the year, not only when you graduate. So I think it might be important to look on a rolling basis to see when they come up and maybe volunteer for a while and then get a paid job, depending on the amount of time you can give without sacrificing your grades. And then the third is just volunteering to shadow, which is probably the most unpredictable one. But people do get through with all of these things. I think persistence is going to be key and not giving up.
Yeah, I think by my count, there's 22 summer programs at UCSF.
Alrighty, for our next question, will a student be put at a disadvantage for graduating university in only 1.5 years?
Say that again, Matthew. I'm sorry, I didn't hear that fully.
Will a student be put at a disadvantage for graduating university in 1.5 years?
If they're graduating university in 1.5.
I guess if they're graduating early, would
Oh.
there be any disadvantage for that?
I think more and more people are looking for more mature students who've had life experiences as a general comment. For example, more than 50% of the UCSF entering class has done things outside of medical school, but that doesn't mean there are students who didn't graduate early or have accelerated graduation. But I guess my advice is more power to you if you are, but there's no rush to go to medical school. And having some of these experiences, working in public health or research or doing other things may help give you more resilience during the hard number of years that you have to follow.
What advice would you give someone who has already graduated with a bachelor's degree, but still has other science prerequisites for medical school, but also can't afford a post-bac program? Do you suggest they take it at a community college?
Yeah, so I've had students like that who have mentored as well. You can definitely take extension or community college courses, build up your GPA, do the MCATs. If you have a great MCAT and community college classes in the prereqs, it's going to be fine. Again, with a good story. And so there's a way to do everything, and you don't have to do it in 1 year either. You can have a job, do these classes slowly, work up towards doing your MCAT once or twice, and then the end of 2 or 3 years, that you may be ready.
Alrighty, for our next question, someone asks, is it still worth applying this cycle, even though it's like already the end of July, basically August?
Well, it all depends on if you think, I personally don't think it's wrong if you have all your ducks in a row, if you can identify all of the different components of the application. So grades, MCATs, people to write the letters of recommendation, experiences that show that you know what you're getting into. And I think, yeah, there's nothing stopping you from applying, but also have a plan B, which I think many people do anyway, in case the application doesn't turn out. And most people I know actually apply in more than one cycle. So, it's not unusual, and it's actually quite normal to apply in 2 cycles. So don't be dismayed. The best situation is if your regular job while you're getting all these stuff together is in the health field, or is health related, or community oriented, because then you can talk about that in the second cycle when you apply and how much you've grown over that time. Because when you apply the second time, you have to say what you did over the last year between the first time you applied and the second time you applied.
How does UCSF view multiple attempts at the MCAT?
I think they view it pretty favorably if you all end up at the right place. It doesn't matter how many times you try. So I wouldn't worry about that. People are very open-minded and kind and empathic.
Specifically, is each score reviewed, or is the most recent score weighed heavier?
I think that usually the best score is looked at, or the most recent score. Particularly if there's a long time period between the first time you did it and the second time or third time. And you can always explain in the comments section of AMCAS as to why the first score was bad and then it improved. Giving context and explanation is always really helpful.
Alrighty, for our next question, do you know how many students are allowed into SJV Prime each cycle?
Yeah, so SJV Prime program is 12 students every year. So that will probably grow in a few years to 50 students, but right now it's going to be 12. The JMP is about 14 to 16, and the Prime US is a similar number too.
Is it okay if someone took most of their medical school prerequisites at a community college?
It's completely fine. People are concerned mainly about doing well, regardless of where you are. I think there have been lots of people in community colleges who go on to medical school and are very successful.
And the California and the state of California is actually spending $12 million a year to get more community college students into medical school. So California Medical Scholars, there's one at UCSF, Fresno, and there's one at UC Davis, San Diego, and UC Riverside. And I think the next one is going to be at Irvine. So
Alrighty, for our next question, how are academic institutional actions, for example, low GPA, viewed by AdComs? I know you already touched on this a little bit. But I guess they want it a little bit more expanded.
Yeah, so it's not the absolute GPA, it's the trajectory. So if you did really poorly in freshman year, but then you improved over time, that's going to be really important. I've had people I mentored who did community college courses after college in prereqs that improved the GPA as well with the MCAT. So there are multiple ways to do it. There's a section where, again, you talk about what happened. And if like 3 years of your undergrad is really spectacular and 1 year sucked, they would understand that. And also, again, looking at biology, physics, math, and chemistry, even if the is going to be important amongst the GPA, even if the overall GPA is low.
What made USCF Med School stand apart from the other med schools you applied to?
UCSF to me is a really unique community where you have people who are really community minded, but who are incredible to be around and who love life outside of medicine as within medicine. So, really good work-life balance and really think creatively. So it is really inspiring to be around all of those people. I think for medical school, the curriculum is very unique. You mix in clinical experiences to traditional classroom experiences from the beginning of medical school. You do projects in the clinic from the beginning, and you work in teams and systems from the beginning. Because, like I mentioned, that's what modern medicine is. So demonstrating teamwork or ability to work in teams is going to be really important in your application as an aside. But that's really exemplified by how UCSF's ethos is. The sum of the parts is much more than the individual.
Alrighty, for our next question, someone asked, is it a red flag to have more research hours than clinical hours?
No. Again, having a story is more important, and having just a basic amount of clinical hours is fine. If the research is health related and you happen to see patients as part of the research, that's kind of like killing two birds with one stone. So you can, if you're lucky to get one of those kinds of jobs, that can count. But yeah, there's no, if research is more than clinical, as long as you have a core number of hours where you saw around patients. Again, the idea is not that you want to be expert in it, is that you know what the career is going to be about that you're getting into.
About how many total applicants get their secondary application?
That's a really tough question. I think it's evolved over the years, but most people who I would say maybe around, depending on school, around 50% or less, but then a high number of the people who get secondaries will get interviews. You can always have, depending on the school, your application re-reviewed. So you can always write to ask that or somebody on your behalf. But in general, that is kind of the general statistic.
Alrighty, next question. Does the UC Prime program include a scholarship? Is there any financial benefit from participating in the Prime program?
I think most schools have a combined financial aid program where they would give you aid based on need many times, and there is scholarships too that are not based on need, but I think most of the money is for people who actually really need it. The Prime programs, there are certain scholarships that might be attached to the Prime programs, but right now it's pretty, there's decent amount of aid based on scholarships and particularly speaking for UCs that people have worked to try to get with or without Prime. But I think people try really hard with Prime in particular to make sure that people can afford it if they're a good match for the program.
Your story is very inspiring. And if you feel comfortable, can you elaborate more on why you were drawn to medicine?
I think I was drawn to medicine because I think it took me a while to even I mean, as a teen or whatever, thinking about medicine, my motivation was kind of more superficial because I didn't really think it through. But over time, I've really understood what motivated me. I mean, and what it was really, I think, helping the underdog or helping people succeed, or helping or lifting people up, because that's what my parents did for people in the village. And medicine was just my way to do that. And now medical education is my way to do that. So that was really has been the central theme of what has pushed me over the years. Speaking for people without voices.
Alrighty, for our next question, did you experience any burnout during your journey? And if so, how did you overcome it?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think the journey isn't easy all the time. I think imposter syndrome is real. I certainly had it. I think many people have it, even though they don't talk about it. And imposter syndrome is when you feel like everybody else is better than you and you might have gotten in by a fluke or something like that. And that's true at all stages. I think the success in each stage is trying to find people like you and not focusing on the few voices that might seem like they know it all, but because everybody is insecure about something at the end of the day. I'd say as the training progressed, people were much nicer along the way. By residency, everybody was really, really kind and smart and fun, and especially the UCSF. And within medical school, it could be a large group of people. So it's just like with any large group of people, you will always find your tribe. So the success of avoiding burnout and sadness and mental health issues is really trying to find new people, having alone time with your own mentor, keeping family front and center. It's easy to just bury yourself in books and not for and kind of not forget about family, but not pay as much attention. But family really grounds you throughout all this stuff. They're the ones who are going to be with you through thick and thin and at the end of the journey, and all these other people come and go. Um, so that is really, those are some of the things that motivate you to stay well and to have good attitudes and mental health during this journey. And there are tons of people who are like you. If you're really interested in medicine for the right reasons, you'll find people who are so much like you, and they'll become some of the best friends in your life.
Would it be frowned upon by the admissions committees to apply to both USFC, USC, UCSF med school and a UCSF master's program?
No, not at all. People don't know, people in medical school don't necessarily know that unless you say so that you're applying, what else you're applying to. All that is kept confidential. So unless you want to tell people, you know, nobody will know. You could disclose it depending on the situation, but I probably caution you against, say you're applying to one completely different thing from medical school, and then you're applying to medical school. It just seems that you're not really dedicated. So I think above all, even if privately you're not really sure at the time, to an application reader, you have to be like 100% sure. It's just like applying for a job, even at Starbucks or frozen yogurt or whatever. you have to like show that you're really interested, and like frozen yogurt ice cream is the best thing on earth, even if you really like smoothies or something better. So similarly with medical school, you really have to really want it, but you also have to demonstrate that you want it.
Alrighty, for our next question, when is the proper time? Like, when do you apply to the UCSF SJV Prime program? And does the Prime program there only accept people from the Central Valley, or is it anywhere in California?
Yeah, so the prime programs generally accept anybody from anywhere, but the SJV Prime program is different because it's a region. So it only accepts people who have ties to the valley, and that's the 9 counties of the San Joaquin Valley. But there are lots of other programs where you don't have to be from the valley to apply into. Um, Pretty much every other program is one of the few geographically restricted programs, and that's really because it's trying to build a workforce in that specific region.
Students who decide to do a master's in global health, will they be able to meet medical school faculty and make connections? And would you recommend it for pre-med students who already have a good GPA?
I wouldn't do a degree just for the sake of doing it, but only if you are excited to do it. Doing an extra degree is expensive, and there are much cheaper ways of trying to meet faculty. And you can always do a degree during medical school, like doing a master's of public health or something like that, or even more epidemiology training if that's what's interesting to you. Um, but um, but if you did do a master's of global health, it is global health sciences. It is and you're excited by it. It's a good way to meet a lot of people very efficiently, if your interests are aligned with that. But again, I caution you against doing a degree for the sake of doing a degree, because you can do experiences that are similar unless you're really motivated to do the degree because of the work in the degree.
Alrighty, for the next two questions.
It's kind of like saying somebody who likes to swim, and then you make them go and have them run because it's going to give them some sort of advantage. It's kind of like, if you're not interested in global health, like why would you do something that's not global health related? Like, it's one of those things. It's like there's such a diverse. I work in the ER as a ER tech, so medicine is very diverse. I mean, you could see the neurology doctors that are very different from the ER doctors, different from the infectious disease people. Everybody's very different, and so you got to find what you're interested in, and just doing something that you think or somebody said. It's kind of like living somebody else's dreams or life. You got to find what you enjoy doing.
Yeah, that's really well said. Thank you.
Alrighty, for the next two questions. So this is about research. Do most people who get into UCSF have a published paper? And if someone does not have has little to none research experience, but has a lot of like clinical and volunteer experience, will they still be a competitive applicant?
Yes, I mean, you don't have to have research to get in. Research is like icing on the cake. Um, I think what's more important is curiosity. Research is a way of demonstrating curiosity or engagement with a creative or creativity. So you can demonstrate creativity in other ways apart from doing a paper. You can work on a project in a community clinic or in a community center that achieved the results in a program. And then maybe you could even evaluate the program to see if it was successful. So there are lots of other ways of demonstrating curiosity or creativity, and that's really what you're trying to show. Research is just an easy way to do that, but it's not the only way. You can write editorials, you can write a book. I mean, those are other ways to demonstrate creativity as well.
If someone applies for the JMP program and they're rejected, will they be considered for the MD program?
Yes. Well, depending on, well, yes and no. Um, there's a kind of a common funnel for all of the programs, and that's because all the programs have one accreditation. But within the funnels, there is each program looks at, so when you get the application, there are all these boxes you can check off. But if one program is not interested, that doesn't, the other programs can still be interested. I guess that's the point. So being not one program not thinking it's going to be the best match doesn't rule out the other programs at all.
So for the next question, what clinical experiences look best in medical school applications? So for example, is shadowing viewed less important as like volunteering in a hospital? And which should be prioritized more to keep grades high, clinical experiences or volunteer experiences?
I would think um having a longitudinal experience with the same group over time is probably going to be the best situation if you can do it. Even a community clinic or the same thing over and over again over time, you develop relationships, that person can write you a letter, etc. But volunteering versus shadowing, I think volunteering has the added luster of service. So you're giving service um, to do something as well. Shadowing, you're just you're getting experience to what it's all about, but you're more passive. So in terms of priorities, I would say, or hierarchy, a long-term longitudinal relationship is the best, but not everybody can do that. Then the second would be something to do with service or volunteering in a clinical context, and then the third will be shadowing. But all three will be important to show that you know what you're getting into.
So for students who did dual enrollment at a community college while in high school, in their medical school application, should they include activities they did while they were in dual enrollment or only activities after their high school graduation?
No, I think you're going to include any college level activities. Again, it particularly if it fits into a theme that you've been doing longitudinally. It's not so much when you did it, but whether or not you can make a story around and link all of the things.
Alrighty. Someone asked if you could repeat the end of the last question.
Oh, the end of the last question was what would I feel more prioritize, volunteer or shadowing? And the reason why I like volunteering is because it has a service component to it, and you're giving service instead of being more passive. So you're doing two things. You're giving service and you're having experiences. Whereas the shadowing is just you're having experiences. So that's why if you can get a volunteer job, and particularly if it's over time, that's going to be the best thing. But shadowing is fine too.
Alrighty. For the next question, what are the criteria that an applicant must meet to receive a secondary at UCSF? And also, do applicants get screened out based on like low GPA or low MCAT? Or is it like a holistic for every single applicant?
No, at the beginning with 9,000 applications, it's really kind of more less holistic. It's more holistic when you get to a few hundred. There's not enough people to do that, unfortunately. But it is done rigorously through multiple eyes. So it's not just like a machine or a bot. Different people, sets of people look at it to make sure that the right decision is being made.
What is something or some things that you wish you knew before medical school? And do you have any advice on writing personal statements, activity, and filling out activities in the application?
Yeah, so things that I wish I knew was that you're just as good as everybody else around you. You're very unique and have a lot to contribute that's different from people around you. And I guess I happened into finding out that having mentors was really rewarding. So the earlier you can do that, even in the beginning of medical school, I talked about getting them now, but you will get mentors along the way, and keeping relationships with them along the way is not only helpful for your career, but it's helpful for you psychologically, because that person also is somebody more objective who you can go to for help. In terms of working with the personal statement, like I mentioned, having something in the beginning that maybe it's a story about a family member who you helped, or somebody in the family who inspired you or motivated you to do medicine, and then how your activities help motivate you even more, and maybe choose one or two activities, and then at the end come back to that story of the original motivation as to why you want to do medicine. You might even want to say what you might want to do in the future, even though you don't know for sure, but at least think about a version of where you might see yourself doing. And in terms of activities, like I mentioned, you could list all the activities, but grouping them amongst themes, if they have a theme, it's going to be much easier to understand than if they were like, 100 different activities that are completely different. And then you can pick on one or two themes within the personal statement to amplify the activities that you want to shine.
I guess the only example is I would say is like, since it's the Olympics now, like, some people like running, some people like swimming, some people do, but you have the people that become excellent at it, and look how much time and effort they put into it, that they're excellent at that one thing, they're the world best at that, is versus, yeah, I like swimming, but you put me in the pool with Katie Ledecky, I'll be, drinking water from, so it's kind of like, you know, we all like doing things, but if you commit to something long term, you become really good at it. And there's that whole 10,000 hour rule thing, Not that you have to do it 10,000 hours, but
I think that's a great point, and that is actually something I wish I knew before medical school too. The idea that there isn't really anything too different between people, except you can get really good just by doing something over and over again. And you know, you're not born a surgeon. You become a surgeon because you are practicing over and over again. Unfortunately, I have to leave a little bit soon because I have to get to my next event. So I'm wondering if we can wrap it up soon.
yeah, just ask the last question, or leave anytime you need to go. I mean, we're glad that you're able to give us the time, and yeah. And any last words of wisdom?
The main word of wisdom is to not give up and to be persistent. That's number one. And sometimes it takes people, 2 or 3 attempts to get their dream. The second piece of advice is that there are lots of other careers in health professions. That's something I wish I knew as well. You can have very rewarding careers in nursing, in advanced nursing, nurse practitioner, physician assistant, in dentistry, pharmacy, physical therapy. So, trying to find your passion is going to be really key if you're not like 100% sure about medicine. And then the third piece of advice is don't underestimate yourself, and don't think of yourself as less than the people around you.
Well, thank you again, Dr. Ching Hong. And